You crack 4 eggs into the pan tonight, and a little voice still whispers that you're doing something wrong. That whisper is a lie. I chased it down for 3 weeks, and what I found is that 4 eggs a day may be one of the cheapest, most complete things you can eat, and the fear you feel was planted on purpose. It stayed buried because the truth costs $0, and nobody makes money selling you something that already sits in your refrigerator. Here's what I promise you. By the end of this trail, I'll hand you a single document from 1913, a rabbit, a Russian laboratory, and one cooking detail that changes everything, the difference between an egg that helps your heart and an egg that quietly hurts it. And I'll show you how to use it tonight with the same pan you already own. It started for me at a kitchen table that wasn't even mine. I was helping clear out my late uncle's house last winter, and inside a drawer under the stove I found a handwritten grocery list from what looked like the 1950s. Eggs, lard, bread, coffee, and the number next to eggs said 6 dozen. 6 dozen eggs for 1 week. For a man who lived to 91, I stood there holding that scrap of paper thinking, how did he eat like that and outlive every diet chart I've ever been handed? So I started digging, and the deeper I went, the angrier I got. Let me start where I started, with the one number everyone throws at you. You've heard it your whole life. An egg has about 186 milligrams of cholesterol, most of it in the yolk, and for decades the rule was simple. Keep dietary cholesterol under 300 milligrams a day. 2 eggs, and you were basically done. 4 eggs, and by that old math, you'd blown past the limit before you even sat down. That was the wall I hit first. It sounds airtight. More cholesterol in the food, more cholesterol in the blood, clogged arteries, heart attack, case closed. That's the story I believed, and maybe you believe it too. But here's the crack I found in that wall. Your liver makes cholesterol. It makes far more than you could ever eat, somewhere around 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams every single day, because your body needs it. Cholesterol builds the walls of every cell you own. It builds the sheath around your nerves. It's the raw material for vitamin D and for your hormones. Your body treats it as precious, not poison. And here's the part that stopped me cold. When you eat more cholesterol, a healthy liver makes less. When you eat less, it makes more. It's a thermostat. Your body has been quietly balancing this the whole time, and for most people, the cholesterol you eat has only a small effect on the cholesterol in your blood. So I ask the obvious question. If the body self-regulates, where did the 300 milligram rule even come from? Who said it, and why did it survive for almost 50 years after the science started to wobble? That question is where the trail turned dark. Because the answer isn't in a lab, it's in a boardroom, and it's in a rabbit cage in Russia over 100 years ago. Hold on to that, because I promise it pays off. But first I had to make sure I wasn't fooling myself. So I went looking for the hard numbers, the real studies, not the headlines. Here's what I found, and it's the moment the whole thing tipped for me. In 2019, researchers pulled together data on more than 250,000 people. I'm talking huge, careful studies tracking real humans over years. And when they looked at moderate egg eaters against people who barely ate eggs, the difference in heart disease risk was essentially nothing. In some of the biggest studies, up to 1 egg a day showed no meaningful rise in heart attack or stroke for the general population. Then I found the one that really got me. A study out of China, published around 2018, followed roughly 500,000 adults for almost 9 years. The people who ate an egg nearly every day had about an 18% lower risk of dying from heart disease and around a 28% lower risk of a certain deadly type of stroke compared to those who rarely ate them. Lower, not higher. The food we were told to fear was sitting next to better outcomes, not worse. And this is the point where you should feel the ground shift, because I did. For 50 years, the message was one direction, and the biggest modern data was pointing the other way. Somebody, somewhere, kept the old message alive long after it should have died. So I stopped trusting the summary and went for the original document. I wanted to know the exact year the fear became official, and I found it. It was 1968. The American Heart Association issued a recommendation telling healthy Americans to eat no more than 3 egg yolks per week. 3 for a whole week. That single line rewired how an entire country looked at breakfast. My uncle's 6 dozen a week suddenly became a crime against your own heart, not because of new proof about eggs, but because of a theory about fat and cholesterol that was riding high at the time. But a recommendation doesn't come from nowhere. Somebody had to convince the world that cholesterol in food was the enemy first. And when I traced that idea back to its root, I didn't land in the 1960s at all. I went back another 55 years to a laboratory in the cold, to a scientist in a cage full of rabbits. That's the clue I promised you, and it changes how you'll see every diet rule you've ever been given. His name was Nikolai Anichkov. The year was 1913. In St. Petersburg, Russia, this young researcher fed purified cholesterol to rabbits, and sure enough, their arteries filled with fatty deposits that looked a lot like human artery disease. It was a real finding. It genuinely shaped 100 years of heart science. For that, some historians call it one of the most important discoveries of the century. But here's the detail that got buried, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. A rabbit is a herbivore. In nature, a rabbit never eats cholesterol, not a crumb. Its body has no system built to handle a flood of it because it was never supposed to encounter any. So of course it piled up in the arteries. The rabbit had no thermostat for it. You are not a rabbit. You're an omnivore with a liver built over millions of years to eat animal foods and to dial your own cholesterol up and down to match. Feeding cholesterol to a creature that never evolved to eat it, and then applying that result to a human being who did, that's the shaky foundation a huge piece of the egg fear was built on. When researchers later fed cholesterol to animals that actually eat it, like dogs and rats, they largely didn't get the same dramatic clogging. I sat with that for a long time. A rabbit in 1913, a recommendation in 1968, and a fear still living in your kitchen tonight more than a century later. That's not science moving slowly. That's something getting stuck on purpose. But the rabbit alone didn't do it. Something had to carry that idea from a cage in Russia into every doctor's office in America. Therefore, I had to find the bridge, the person, and the money that turned a shaky theory into a national rule. And that's where the story stops being an honest mistake. The man most often at the center of it was a researcher named Ancel Keys. In the 1950s and 60s, he championed the idea that dietary fat and cholesterol drove heart disease. His famous work compared diets and heart disease across several countries and seemed to show a tight link. It was powerful, it was persuasive, it swept the field. But here's what I dug up. His most famous study started with data from many countries and presented the ones that fit the theory most cleanly. Critics later pointed out that when you looked at all the available countries, the neat line got a lot messier. The story was cleaner than the world actually was, and now the part that made me put my pen down. Around this same era, follow the money. The food industry had a powerful interest in where the blame landed. Documents uncovered by researchers and published in a major medical journal in 2016 revealed that back in the 1960s, the sugar industry paid scientists to downplay sugar's role in heart disease and to point the finger squarely at fat and cholesterol instead. Paid. In today's money, we're talking about payments worth tens of thousands of dollars to shape what the public was told to fear. Think about what that means for your breakfast. While the whole country was learning to be terrified of an egg yolk, a quiet hand was helping steer that fear away from the sugar in the cereal bowl right next to it. The egg took the blame, the sugar walked free, and you and I inherited a rule built partly on a herbivore's arteries and partly on somebody else's profit. That was the moment my curiosity turned into something hotter. Because this wasn't just a wrong idea. It was a wrong idea that a lot of people had reason to keep alive. You can't sell a special heart-healthy, cholesterol-free spread if people trust the humble egg. You can't sell a lifetime of supplements if the cheapest complete food on earth is already doing the job. Somebody profited every single time you looked at 4 eggs and felt afraid. And that's where I need to pause for just a moment, because everything I've uncovered on this trail, the rabbit, the boardroom, the buried yolk, is part of a much deeper pattern of hidden knowledge that I've spent a long time digging into and documenting. I put the most complete version of this research into a book. It's called First Fixes. And if you go deeper, it becomes Deeper Fixes. And deeper still, the full system, and it's available in the description below. It walks through exactly how ordinary foods and everyday decisions got quietly hijacked, and what you can do about it in a practical, affordable way starting today. If this trail resonates with you, that book is the next step. But let's get back to what's inside those 4 eggs, because this is where the investigation took a turn I genuinely wasn't expecting. But if the fear was that hollow, I had to know the flip side. What was actually inside those 4 eggs that made a man live to 91 eating 6 dozen a week? Because you don't get that lucky on empty calories. Therefore, I turned the investigation around. I stopped asking why eggs were dangerous and started asking what we lost by avoiding them. And this is where I need to talk directly to you. Yes, you. Sitting there thinking this all sounds nice, but you're on a fixed budget in an ordinary kitchen with no fancy groceries and no room for another expensive health fad. This next part is built specifically for you, because the eggs in your refrigerator right now might be the single best return on a dollar in your entire kitchen. You don't need to buy anything new. You just need to see what you already have. Start with the protein. An egg gives you around 6 grams of complete protein, and the word complete matters. It carries every essential amino acid your body can't make on its own in a balance so ideal that scientists literally use the egg as the gold standard, the reference other proteins get measured against. 4 eggs give you roughly 24 grams of that top-tier protein. For a person over 60 who's quietly losing muscle every year, that's not breakfast. That's protection. Muscle is what keeps you off the floor, out of the hospital, and out of a care home. And you can buy it for pennies. Now, the one almost nobody talks about, choline. This is the clue that hides in plain sight. Choline helps build the chemical your brain uses for memory. It helps keep your liver from getting fatty. And here's the alarming part I found. Buried in nutrition surveys, most adults don't get nearly enough. Studies suggest well over 90% of people fall short of the recommended intake. The recommended amount sits around 425 milligrams a day for women and 450 for men. 1 egg yolk gives you close to 150 milligrams. Do the math on 4 eggs, you've covered most of your daily need with a food that costs less than a cup of coffee. And where is nearly all that choline hiding? In the yolk. The exact part they spent 50 years telling you to throw away. That gutted me a little. For decades, careful people scooped out the yolk and ate the white, believing they were doing the smart, healthy thing. They were pouring the best part down the drain, the brain nutrient, the eye nutrients, the vitamin D, most of the goodness, and paying for the privilege of throwing it away. Because there's more in that yolk. 2 nutrients called lutein and zeaxanthin, which collect in the back of your eye and help protect against the slow vision loss that steals independence from so many older people. There's vitamin B12 for your nerves and blood. There's vitamin D, the one so many of us are low on, especially in winter. There's vitamin A, and there's high-quality fat that actually helps your body absorb all of it. That last part matters. The fat in the yolk is why the nutrients in the yolk get absorbed so well. It's a complete package that evolved to build an entire living creature. Of course, it can help maintain one. So here's what I want you to actually do tonight with what you own. 4 eggs, whole, yolk, and all. If money is tight, this is not a luxury. A dozen eggs is still one of the cheapest sources of complete protein and brain nutrients you can put on a table, often cheaper per gram of protein than meat, cheese, or fish. Cook them and eat them as a real meal, ideally earlier in the day, because that hit of protein in the morning keeps you full and steadies you for hours, which means you snack less and spend less. People report the same thing over and over. Once they try it, they stop reaching for expensive packaged snacks by mid-morning because they simply aren't hungry. The egg does quietly what a whole shelf of pricey protein products promises and fails to do. But, and this is the turn that leads to the very end of the trail, how you cook those 4 eggs matters more than almost anyone told you. And this is the piece that took me the longest to find, the piece that ties the rabbit, the yolk, and your own frying pan into one answer. Because it turns out there is a real difference between an egg that helps you and an egg that can genuinely work against you, and it has nothing to do with the number of eggs. It has everything to do with what happens in the pan. Let me set it up, because you need to understand why before I give you the how. Cholesterol itself, sitting quietly in a yolk, is stable and useful. Your body handles it fine. But cholesterol can be damaged. When you expose it to high heat, to air, and to time, it can oxidize. It reacts and changes into something else. Scientists have a name for these damaged forms. They're called oxysterols, or oxidized cholesterol. And this is the fork in the road that the old 3 eggs a week rule completely stepped over, because a growing body of research points to a very different culprit than the one we were handed. It's not the fresh cholesterol in your food that appears to trouble the arteries. It's oxidized cholesterol, the damaged version. Researchers studying how artery plaque actually forms have increasingly focused on these oxidized forms as the ones that promote the inflammation and buildup we worry about. In other words, for 50 years we may have been blaming the whole egg for the sins of a damaged fraction of it, a fraction we ourselves create in the kitchen. So the real question was never how many eggs. The real question was, how do you keep the cholesterol in those eggs from oxidizing? And once I understood that, everything my uncle did suddenly made sense. Everything the old grocery list was pointing at came into focus. That brings me to the answer at the end of the trail, the withheld piece, the $0 truth, the thing that pulls the rabbit and the boardroom and the yolk all together into one simple action you can take this weekend. Here it is. The way you protect the goodness in 4 eggs is to cook them gently and to keep the yolk soft and intact, low heat. Short time, minimal exposure of the yolk to blistering direct heat and air. Oxidized cholesterol forms most when yolks are cooked hard, at high temperatures, for a long time. With the fat broken up and fully exposed, think a yolk scrambled hard and dry in a screaming hot pan, or an egg powder, or an egg cooked and then left sitting exposed for a long time before reheating. The gentlest ways to eat an egg poached in water, soft-boiled in the shell, or cooked low and slow so the yolk stays runny and protected, keep that cholesterol in its stable, natural form, right alongside all that choline and lutein and vitamin D you paid for. And where did this thread finally tie off for me? In the food science research on cholesterol oxidation products, work that has been building quietly for decades, showing that processing, high heat, and long storage are what generate these oxysterols in animal foods, while the intact yolk in a freshly, gently cooked egg keeps them remarkably low. The very research that should have rewritten the egg rules was sitting in food chemistry journals the whole time, while the front of the kitchen still ran on a rabbit from 1913. Now walk it back through the whole trail with me, because this is the moment it all clicks. A herbivore rabbit got fed a nutrient it was never built to eat, and its arteries clogged. A persuasive researcher and a well-funded industry took a piece of that idea and aimed it at the egg, away from sugar. A single recommendation in 1968 froze the fear in place. And that fear told you to throw away the yolk, the exact part holding the choline for your brain, the lutein for your eyes, the vitamin D for your bones. Meanwhile, the one thing that genuinely matters, the difference between stable cholesterol and oxidized cholesterol, was never even mentioned, because it can't be sold. It's free. It's just how you turn the burner. Think about what that means. The whole tangled mess resolves into something a child could do. Keep the heat low, keep the yolk soft, eat the whole egg. Eat all 4 if you want a real, complete, protective meal that costs less than almost anything else on the shelf. The convenience industry could never make this into a monthly bill, so it let a 100-year-old rabbit study do the talking instead. And the official world has quietly admitted it, if you know where to look. In 2015, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the top nutrition rule book in the country, dropped the specific daily limit on cholesterol that had stood for decades. They wrote that cholesterol is no longer considered a nutrient of concern for overconsumption in the way it once was. They took the wall down, but they did it in a dense government document that almost no one reads, in language so soft that the fear in your kitchen never even noticed. The rule was repealed. Nobody rang a bell, and so the whisper survived the very science that killed it. Now, let me answer the skeptic in you, because I had the same one in me. There are some people, researchers call them hyper-responders, whose blood cholesterol does climb more than average when they eat a lot of dietary cholesterol. If you have a specific genetic condition, or your doctor is managing your cholesterol closely, this is a conversation to have with them, not with a stranger on a screen. I'm not telling you to ignore your own body or your own doctor. What I'm telling you is that the blanket fear handed to every single person, regardless of who they are, was never as solid as it was sold. For most healthy adults, whole eggs, cooked gently, are food good, cheap, complete food, not a threat. And I keep coming back to that grocery list in the drawer. 6 dozen eggs a week. A man who lived to 91, sharp to the end, in a generation that ate the whole egg without a shred of guilt, before a boardroom taught his children to be afraid of their own breakfast. He never read a single study. He just never stopped doing the thing that worked, because no one ever managed to talk him out of it. The knowledge didn't need to be discovered. It needed to be unburied. That's what this whole hunt gave back to me, and it's what I want to hand to you now. Not a new product, not a supplement, not a subscription. Just a food that was already yours, freed from a fear that was never really about your health. 4 eggs whole, cooked low and slow, yolk soft and golden. Somebody spent a lot of effort making you flinch at that plate. Tonight you get to stop flinching. If you've ever poured a yolk down the drain because someone told you it was the dangerous part, I want you to feel that little sting of being lied to, and then I want you to let it go, because now you know better. And knowing better is the whole point of this place. You're the kind of person who suspects that a lot of what we call progress was really just someone finding a way to charge you for what used to be free. You were right. This is the proof. So here's what I'm asking. Tell me one thing in the comments. Did you grow up throwing away the yolk? Or did someone in your family, maybe an older relative like my uncle, eat eggs their whole life and outlive every rule? Tell me their age. Tell me where you're watching from. I read them, and those stories are the real archive we're building together. The one no boardroom controls. And if you believe, like I do, that useful knowledge keeps getting quietly buried so somebody can sell it back to us in pieces, then come with me. Subscribe and stand with the people digging it back up. Because the next trail I'm following is about something in your kitchen right now that you keep in the refrigerator out of habit, a food that a 1940s home economics bulletin swore should never be chilled at. And the reason why will change how your whole shelf is arranged. That one surprised me more than the eggs did. And I can't wait to show you where it leads. I chased this trail for you, but this was only the overview. Inside the Timeless Ways circle, I pick up right where I just stopped with the full egg protocol. Ask me your own question there, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You're not doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen and you can cancel any time with one click.